Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are redoing 2016 makeup. This is a much heavier application than I have done in a very long time. Lashes bigger than I think I've worn in years. And you know what? I'm really liking the eye, all things considered. I kind of want to do this look all over again with like lighter coverage and a softer, more modern approach, but I'm not mad at it. And it seems like this trend is coming, and it seems like everyone's really into 2016 makeup, so I had to do it for you, but I don't know how I feel. As always, let me know your thoughts. I want to know what you think, and if that's something you're into, make sure to keep on watching, and don't forget to subscribe, because I upload every other day. That'll be the best way to stay up to date on all the fun stuff I'm posting. So if you want to jump into whatever this is, stay tuned. All right, let's jump right in, and I'm so excited to do this because I love a bold beat, and I've been much more like no makeup, and today we're going in the opposite direction. So I'm gonna start with the MAC Painterly Paint Pot, one of the OG best eye primers ever, especially for that like super bold and over the top 2016 makeup. And I'm gonna take that on a flat topped brush, and we're just going to prime the lids. Now, 2016 is when everybody sort of stopped setting their eye primer. I do not agree with that. I actually love setting my eye primer, always did, so I will be continuing to do that. But the amount of eye primer that we put on in 2016 was kind of ridiculous. And I would take it all the way around the inner corner, where I would end up putting concealer on later anyway. We would go between the brows, and this was like the whole base. I would take a beauty sponge and sort of press that in. And I'm actually still in love with the same powders I loved in 2016. This is the Givenchy Prism Libre, and I'm going to be using this as my loose powder for the entire face. So I would mix it together. I would take way more than I probably should have, and I would set down the eyes so much that I would end up with an entire film of powder all over my shirt. In the spirit of 2016, we're going to do eyes first, and I'm going to be jumping into the Sultry palette from Anastasia. This was like the palette for me back then, and everybody in 2016 was doing really warm tone smoky eyes, and I was living my cool tone fantasy. So I'm going to continue to do cool tone, and I'm going to start with the shade Twig, this brown right here. And I'm going to take that above the crease. I used to go in much heavier and much darker than I do now. You know, really accentuate all of those colors. And this holds up. Like, that is still a really pretty brown. And I'm going to take a little more of that and go a little lower and continue to blend. That's probably the biggest difference between 2016 and now. In 2016, I would go in with a lot more product and then just blend, whereas now I like to take a little bit and slowly build it up. But that is still one of the best contour shades for the eye I think I've ever used. Same brush, we're going to go in with Birch, which is a little bit warmer, and I'm going to take that on that same brush, and I'm going to go over the crease and up a little bit. Nowadays, we like to go in with a light color and then gradually get darker. In 2016, I started with a middle shade, blended up with lighter shades, and then blended down with darker shades, and kind of met in the middle, which can be pretty, but it definitely takes a lot more effort than what we do now. Switching to a fluffy brush, I'm going to go into the bone shade up here called Fresh, and I'm going to take that under the brow and then blend it down. This is a trick I still do to make everything look more well blended and just soften everything over. Smaller brush going into Dystopian, this brown here. I love a dark brown on a smoky eye. I still do. But back then, brown was really, for me, just more of a base to then put black shadow on top of. And that's probably what we're going to do today. On that same brush, we're going to go into that black shade. And I'm going in with a very small amount and really just concentrating that at the lash line. And then when there's nothing left on the brush, I'm going to blend it up. Back to that first or second brush with no additional product. Just going to blend and soften. And now this is the moment of truth. I used to live for the rose quartz shade, but I kind of want to go silver. So I think I'm going to go into Cyborg, the silver shade. I'm going to load that up on a flat packer brush. We are going to give it a quick mist just to foil it even further. Back to the brush that we used with the black, I'm going to take a tiny bit of brown, pat that over the edge, and then diffuse the crease. I love the way that looks already. Okay, I'm going to do this on this eye, throw on a lash, and do my brows, and I'll be right back. I do not remember the last time I had lashes on at all, let alone this big. Jumping into foundation, my skin is already primed. I'm going to be using the Il Makiage foundation because it is the most full coverage foundation I own. And I'm going to take 3 pumps of that, which I can tell you right now is way too much foundation, but that's what we used to do. And I'm going to apply that all over the skin and then blend it out with a beauty blender. This is so much foundation, but we went in heavy. And then the Tarte Shape Tape, and I still use this concealer to this very day. However, the difference is I go in with probably, I don't know, a third of what I used to do. Now, I like to do something like this. Back then, we would kind of fill in this whole area. It would go here, around the nose, down the nose. Really, we just put on a shit ton of concealer. So that's what we're doing today. And this was a beauty sponge only. Now we would even let the concealer on the under eye kind of sit there for a little bit, just so that it would get even more full coverage. Like, that is so much concealer. And because it was so much concealer, it was so likely to crease. So we would look down, roll our eyes, make sure there were no creases, and as fast as possible, set that whole thing down with so much powder. Like, more powder than I use in a week in a single day. And it was so much that we would then switch to a bigger brush and add even more powder. And as is expected, I feel like I have no features left on my face. Nowadays, we go in with a much lighter coverage. That way we can use less bronzer, less contour, less everything. And now that I'm looking at this, I need so much color back into my face. But before that, one powder was never enough. We would take a pressed powder and we would use that to brush over the loose powder. And that would get rid of the loose powder, which absolutely did work, but it was just so much powder. To go into bronzer, and we definitely need a lot of it. Now we're going to use a nice warm shade to add the contour of the cheeks back in. One thing in 2016 that was really big, of course, as you remember, was going in with a contour and then a bronzer. But prior to that really becoming super mainstream, we just added way too much bronzer. So you can kind of go in whatever way you want. I will be skipping the contour today and just doing the bronzer. We would add way too much bronzer on the perimeter. We would then take it across the forehead, which I still really don't dislike that placement, but we would add so much bronzer that it was almost comical how much bronzer we put on the face. And then we would take our beauty sponge, we would go back into our setting powder, and we would cut the cheek. And rather than just going in with a smaller amount of bronzer and not getting it everywhere, we would get it wherever we wanted and then just bake under where we wanted it. This feels so heavy. I'm going to go into blush, and I'm going to go into this Hourglass palette because I love the Hourglass blushes, and I did even back then. And I'm going to take a very small amount of this. The one thing I will say that I love about the way trends have gone is we're not afraid of blush anymore. Back then, it was a very small amount of blush. And then once that blush was down, we would actually go back. See, like a little bit of blush. Still feels very heavy. But after we did our blush, we would go back into our powder and we would pull that over everything, because why just put on less when you can layer powder on top to tone everything down? Next, we're going to highlight, and if we were highlighting with anything that wasn't this shape of a brush, we were doing it wrong. I'm going to use the highlight shade out of this palette, and I'm going to take that on the cheekbone, around the brow, and I'm going to apply so much of this that it's going to look like a little bit of a stripe on my cheek. That is so much highlight. Now, this is where I'm going to deviate because to me, this stripe on the cheek is more than I like. So I'm going to go into my blush brush and I'm just going to blend that down a little. I always liked to take my blush over my highlight, but not as much as I do now, because you see how it just brought it back to life? Like, this is something I wish I did in 2016. With that same highlighter, we're going to go down the nose, over the lip, high point of the forehead, and the chin, because if we're not bathing in highlighter, we did not put on enough. One hit of setting spray, and at this point, I would just fan the face, but instead, I am going to take my sponge and just press everything in, just to make it look a little bit lighter, because right now it feels and looks so heavy. All right, I'm going to just smoke out the lower lash and be right back. I need to go pick out a lip color. All right, I am back, and if you have gone as smoky as you think you need to, in 2016, go smokier. Like, we used to blend our smokiness all the way into our highlight and blush. I like how dark the eyes look, though. I'm not going to be, like, going this dark from now on, but I do feel like I should start going a little bit darker, you know? When I tell you the chokehold that the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk liner had on us in 2016, I don't think you understand. And there are a ton of liners now that are fantastic, but this was like the one. And then we had to pair that with a pinky nude lip that was like a little bit lighter, just to give ourselves an ombre, because why line your lips and give yourself a plump lip when you could just add a light lip in the center? And of course, it had to be a matte lip. So to get the full effect, I'm going to let this dry down, and I'll be right back. And in 2016, this is where we would stop. Now, I'm not going to say that I don't like how it looks at all. I definitely think it's very heavy. I think I could wear about half the amount of concealer, so much less coverage. I think the bronzer and blush are a little muddy. I personally would want more blush on top. But for, kicking it back to 2016, I'm not hating it as much as I thought I would be. As always, let me know your thoughts down below. I would love to hear it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!